Do not let this silly cover page of Frankie directing baby turtles to the sea fool you. One Piece chapter 1085 titled The Death of Nefertari Cobra is one of the most shocking, jaw-dropping, heart-stopping chapters we have ever seen. As Imu took their seat upon the empty throne, Cobra's heart began to race to the point where he had trouble breathing. Before him was an impossible ruler. No one was ever supposed to sit upon the empty throne. This went against everything it was intended to symbolize. No individual person should ever have the power to control the entire world. But here they were, the secret ruler of the world. Lord Imu began to speak, and as they did, they actually referred to themselves in the third person as Mu. They decided to personally address two of the points King Cobra brought up, and for some reason, they also decided to permit Cobra to ask a single question in exchange. King Cobra coughed before asking the number one question on all of our minds when it comes to the impossible ruler. Who are you? Still coughing, King Cobra expressed that he had actually heard the name Imu before. He recognized that it could very well be a coincidence, but one of the original 20 royal leaders that founded the world government and became one of the first celestial dragons was actually named Imu. Lord Imu's response to this was swift and unyielding. This sort of curiosity bordered on insolence, and as such, it would not be acknowledged with an answer. Now, that's pretty significant. It's entirely possible that this Imu is the very same founding celestial dragon. If that's the case, maybe the Ope Ope no Mi's gift of eternal life was given to them. There's no doubt a connection there, but I'm doubtful that they're exactly one and the same. But instead of that one, King Cobra's first questions would be directly addressed. Imu began by saying that D was the moniker of their ancient enemy. They'd elaborate by saying that in modern times, it has appeared rather frequently, but even still, it was nothing but a faint echo of its former self. They'd emphasize the point that everyone who now possesses the name isn't even aware of its true meaning at this point. However, this so-called irritation was only able to persist into this time period on account of Queen Lily Nefertari's grave mistake 800 years ago, the mention of which confused King Cobra. Imu added that the very same could be said about the quote, irksome scholars that were investigating the so-called Void Century. Now, we may not have the identity of this figure just yet, but now that they are actually speaking, it's pretty clear how irritable and intolerant they can actually be, which is pretty terrifying. Imu stated that without Queen Lily's failure, there would be no pirates pursuing the poneglyphs in hopes of treasure either, aka the One Piece. That without the incompetence of the sovereign that denied her celestial dragon status, the indestructible relics known as the poneglyphs would have never been scattered all across the world. So it looks like whoever Queen Lily was, she set in motion a series of events that, despite the passage of time, has provided the world with the possibility of resistance in all its many forms. King Cobra was too stunned to speak. According to Lord Imu, the spread of the poneglyphs was by far the worst possible outcome for them. So much so that one was left to wonder if such a thing truly was a mistake, or perhaps it was in fact just a part of an even larger plan. How exactly Queen Lily managed to spread so many indestructible accounts of the true history throughout the entirety of the world and in many places outside of the world government's reach is yet another half answer, half mystery situation we should all be used to by now when it comes to this series. Perhaps it was an ability of hers to do so. But again, to have it presented as a mistake that is at the very least up to speculation makes it sound a lot more complicated than just that. And considering she's been set up to be this grand orchestrator, maybe she's the origin of the voice of all things. If we're to assume that this was all intentional, then it's possible that the locations of each poneglyph was intentional as well. That might say something about the fact that the poneglyph connected to Pluton's location was in her home kingdom of Alabasta. King Cobra said nothing, but this may have only added validity to the possibility. In turn, the five elders each began to unstow and wield their various weapons. Lord Imu was certain that the truth was undoubtedly provided within the contents of the letter Lily left behind. To this point, Lord Imu questioned if King Cobra only referred to his ancestor as Queen Lily of House Nefertari on purpose. This was bad. Imu told the man to go ahead and use her full name as written on the letter. And with that, King Cobra knew that it was all over for him. There was truly no chance of him ever leaving this room alive. Aloud, he expressed his suspicion that there was no lie he could possibly tell that would satisfy them enough to let him go. Mr. Monopoly Lorax Pringles had a gun in his hand as he admitted the fact that Cobra's demise was decided upon the very moment he saw the Great Imu. King Cobra's heavy breathing intensified. It made total sense. They couldn't possibly allow anyone to know that the world's greatest taboo was an utter lie. Hiding away within this great chamber was Sabo, who could feel the sinister atmosphere of the room. Finally, King Cobra began to utter the truth, that the letter from the ruler of Alabasta that was crafted 800 years ago was indeed signed by Queen Nefertari, D. Lily. Imu paused for a moment. Then they repeated the dreaded mark of their sworn enemy. This alone was enough to confirm that Lily's betrayal was intentional. Then, in an instant, a darkened arrow jetted towards King Cobra and directly pierced him, rocketing him out of his wheelchair. In turn, Sabo leapt into scorching action over his shoulder, much to the surprise of the 5 elders. Using the signature technique of his late brother, Sabo caught all 5 elders within his fire fist attack. Not stopping there, Sabo quickly shot out a torrent of fire he called Smothered Mate at Lord Imu, a reference to the chess and shogi move where the king is checked by a knight despite being surrounded by its own pieces, which is pretty badass. Imu remained stoic for a moment before very clearly expressing displeasure as they demanded to know where this person came from, as in turn, the fiery assault was devoured whole by the now oversized face of Lord Imu. The darkened entity loomed closer, and to take the place of the 5 elders were 5 similarly shrouded entities. Weapon in hand and King Cobra at his feet, Sabo admitted his desire to take them all out in a single move. Looking around, he was convinced that here, at the very top of the world, he had made his way into hell. Now things get a bit more ominous when you remember the mysterious dark and red-eyed creatures obscured by the fog of the Florian Triangle. They look eerily similar, and those things are arguably the largest creatures in all of One Piece, and we still don't know a single thing about them. Just then, a wall-mounted Deden Mushi snapped a picture of Sabo and King Cobra. They were surprisingly quick to attempt a cover-up. Still, just barely hanging on, King Cobra sought to confirm that Sabo was in fact Luffy's brother. Rolling over onto his back, King Cobra was intrigued by the fact that despite being a member of the Revolutionary Army, Sabo still stepped in to save him, a king. According to Sabo, the Revolutionary Army was far more concerned with the monsters that sat above the kings and queens, the Celestial Dragons. He then asked if the king somehow knew Luffy. As he bled out, King Cobra said that Luffy once stepped in to save him too, which to Sabo sounded just like something Luffy would do. Holding on to King Cobra, Sabo fled from the hellish ensemble of elders and insidious shadow ruler. King Cobra insisted that he was dead weight and that Sabo should leave him behind since he'd have a better chance of escaping on his own. But Sabo refused to do so. There was something King Cobra had come to understand, and if Sabo were to die here, they would be in serious trouble since there was a message he needed the man to deliver to both Luffy and Princess Vivi. Looking grim, he implored Sabo to tell them both that they share the moniker D. Sabo was confused, but King Cobra continued by saying that he finally knew the path Alabasta would need to follow. Queen Lily's letter was intended to give her descendants the letter of D. The mention of this moniker made Sabo think back to childhood with his 2 brothers. As they ate, he noted that they both had D in their names and wondered if it was just a coincidence. Neither of them seemed to really know or really care, as to them, a name was just a name. With his mouth full, Luffy asked Sabo if he wanted one in his name too. That way he'd be Sadbo. Sabo wasn't a fan of the letter placement, but Ace thought it was pretty funny, and I really hope that Sadbo catches on. Side note, this is really making me rethink the whole Rox Dijabek thing. It was said that he aspired to become king of the world. And with that, we should all know better than to trust world government propaganda at this point. Rox apparently knew a lot of taboo knowledge. And what's a bigger taboo than the existence of the Great Imu? Maybe he was ready for the dawn to arrive, but for some reason, Roger and Garp, 2 fellow D-Clan members, disagreed with his timing. Maybe it was through that battle that they even came to understand what the moniker meant at all. Point is, Rox might not be the bad guy he's been so thoroughly presented to be. But to interrupt all this would be yet another dark arrow, and I'm beginning to wonder if this isn't some oversized devilish tale, which would be pretty insane considering the whole devil fruit thing. Is it possible that we are looking at the devil fruit here? Honestly, it could be a whole slew of things. The void fruit? The nightmare fruit? I mean, it's certainly not the darkness or shadow fruit, that's for sure. Whatever the case, It's pretty damn scary. And with such similar looks, I'm left to wonder if perhaps the 5 elders themselves were created by Imu somehow, or just provide an extension of Imu's power. Regardless, this attack managed to pierce both of them simultaneously. This is a clear testament to the creature's might, considering Sabo's haki mastery. His observation and armament haki were no match. At that, it's possible that these things are just silhouettes intended to keep some surprise for later, but with them all taking on different shapes and sizes, maybe they're all just clad in full-body armament haki. There are so many possibilities here. As he bled, Sabo called out to the fallen king as the wretched maw of Imu drew near. Rising one final time, King Cobra again spoke of the poneglyphs. Standing between the attacker and his would-be savior, further details of Cobra's statement, a quote of that all-important letter, were conveniently obscured by the horrendous roar of the entity. The final words of the letter read as such: "Fly the flag that heralds the world's eventual dawn. Nefertari, D. Lily." Sabo looked on in horror as King Cobra thought to himself that he was truly counting on the young revolutionary. He needed him to live on. Sabo then cried out the king's name once more before fleeing. And as the terrifying being stalked over the king's corpse, one of them noticed something. Another undesired observer. As from a very tiny hole in the wall, a single eye could be seen. It was King Wapol, and he saw everything. King Cobra was killed before his very eyes. He never liked the guy, but he could hardly celebrate after seeing something so terrible. Not only that, but he'd also accidentally stumbled across the absolute biggest skeleton in the world government's closet, the existence of Lord Imu, who he absolutely did not want to know anything about. Wapol ran as fast as he could, with tears and snot streaming down his face. Truly, only One Piece could make a character like Wapol, a laughable villain from the very early days of the series, come into the possession of such a crazy, monumental secret. While all this was happening, the many other royals of the world were still meeting behind the Grand Round Table inside the council chamber. The absences of King Cobra and King Wapol were apparent to them. They would then be informed that the two kings would not be attending the meeting, but the rest of them were to continue regardless. So they already know about Wapol's identity. Yikes. The king that looked like Abraham Lincoln joked about King Cobra's passionate speech having drained him of his strength, wondering if perhaps Alabasta's king was satisfied with the dissolution of the warlord system alone. From there, they would move on to the remaining discussions. For starters, there was the coalition of the 4 northern nations that sought independence. Elsewhere, after she managed to be freed from the clutches of St. Charlos, Fukaboshi told Shirahoshi that the conference was nearly over, so they should go wait at the Red Port. That way, they wouldn't have to deal with any moronic celestial dragons. Manboshi checked to see if his sister was alright, since she was looking elsewhere. Apparently, Shirahoshi was hoping to say goodbye to Princess Vivi, but since she wasn't around, she wondered where her fellow princess had gone. As she said this, Vivi demanded to know what was going on, as she apparently had been tied up. So much for Rob Lucci protecting her, huh? As she remained bound inside a guest room, she questioned whose orders her captors were following. She furthermore threatened to tell the entire world what they were putting her through. From there, we would see the former members of CP9, who despite their overwhelming failure, have all been promoted to CP0 positions. And when I say overwhelming failure, I mean it. They failed to secure the blueprints to Pluton, failed to secure Nico Robin, the so-called devil child and only person who could actually read the poneglyphs, which even Imu seems to fear, absolutely botched a Buster Call, completely lost one of the world government's 3 major strongholds in the form of Venice Lobby, and literally all lost their respective fights to a band of pirates that declared war on the world government right in front of them. I'm willing to make a case for Rob Lucci considering his exceptional talent and potential. But these guys? The world government dumped Who's Who, the original Rob Lucci and Impel Down for losing to Shanks. Shanks! I would love to know how in the hell these guys managed to pull this off, because this is honestly a more unbelievable come-up than Buggy becoming a Yonko. Jabra the Wolf would tease Vivi about being a bit too forward. In his opinion, she needed to be more indirect if she wanted her freedom. Khalifa would inform the princess that no one was going to save her, that once her disappearance becomes public knowledge, she would likely spend the remainder of her life as a slave. Now, this is very peculiar. Given the fact that they so swiftly identified Wapol as the observer, I'm left to wonder if they decided to detain Princess Vivi before or after the whole Cobra thing. The only reason I'm thinking about before is on account of the fact that Imu had her picture in hand despite destroying the pictures of Shirahoshi, Luffy, and Blackbeard. And thanks to this new information, we now know that Shirahoshi, the ancient weapon aside, 3 of these photographs were representative of a D-clan member. Princess Vivi inquired as to whether or not Princess Shirahoshi was safe or not. Jabra didn't think it was the right time for Vivi to be worried about anyone besides herself, but he told her that they had gotten word that some trouble related to the Mermaid Princess broke out, but she apparently made it out safe and sound, which brought Vivi at least some relief. Jabra continued by saying that after the attempted assassination of St. Charlos, both Leo and Sai proudly proclaimed themselves to be members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, much to the astonishment of the many courtyard guests. And I am really excited to see how this impacts the Straw Hats going forward. At the same time, in the home of the gods, the actions of Admiral Fujitora aided in the freeing of many slaves. This really pissed Admiral Ryokugyu off, so the two of them actually got into a fight with each other. This year's reverie was pretty damn eventful, a lot more eventful than Jabra knows. Vivi thought to herself about how she would manage to escape, as just then, things got even crazier. Running as fast as he could while biting straight through the walls like Pac-Man with cheat codes, King Wapol made his entrance as he cried out, begging to be spared, saying that he didn't see anything at all. Vivi recognized the king and saw this as her chance to escape. Wapol was an unrelenting force of fear, as the somewhat recently appointed agents of Cyberpol's most infamous sector all just stood around, completely dumbfounded, only to then notice that Princess Vivi, the one person their entire group was charged with detaining, suddenly went missing. Added to the list of failures. Again, I'm all for making old characters relevant again, but this is really pushing it. Wapol's wife, Queen Cinderella, saw him running and had apparently been looking all over for him. She then also noticed Vivi tagging along with him. Cinderella was shocked to see her husband pay no mind to her at all, as Vivi wondered how long the gluttonous king would keep running. Wapol intended to go as far as it took and was willing to run to the ends of the world if he needed to, a proposition that Vivi gladly agreed to. Much to the horror of Wapol's queen, who was now under the impression that her husband was running away with a mistress to elope and begin a life on the run. And I doubt anyone really cares after a chapter like this, but King Cobra's final order to Pell and Chaka was to protect Princess Vivi. So where in the world are they? As always, I'm Celestial Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching. Have an awesome day. I love you.